In the year 2142, humanity had finally nailed it. The great cosmic middle finger to every snob who said space wasn't for humans. The orbital tower, a colossal needle poking defiantly into the sky, stood as a testament to human ingenuity, stubbornness, and the occasional need to show off. Its official name was the Celestial Ascension, but everyone just called it Sky Spire. Because when you've spent trillions building a giant stick to poke the heavens, you don't have time for pretentiousness. Commander Zephyr Halloway leaned against the console, the weight of 1,000 bureaucratic nightmares pressing onto his shoulders. The United Nations, in their infinite wisdom, had decided that the Sky Spire was the perfect location for a diplomatic summit. Peace talks, they called them. Zephyr had another name. Welcome to the circus, enjoy the clowns. Hey Zeph, you look like someone stole your lunch money, Lieutenant Marla Quinn drawled, sidling up beside him with a grin sharper than a laser scalpel. She was the kind of person who could find humor in a black hole. What's eating you, besides the usual existential dread? Zephyr snorted, pushing his dark hair out of his eyes. Just wondering how many diplomats you can fit into a single escape pod if we need to jettison this circus. I'm betting it's fewer than we'd like. Marla laughed, a sound like gravel rattling in a tin can. What, you think something's gonna go wrong? Come on, Zeph, it's just a bunch of people in fancy suits pretending the universe isn't falling apart. Yeah, and if they're pretending hard enough, maybe the universe will start believing it too, Zephyr said, scanning the room filled with security monitors and caffeine addicts. But seriously, Quinn, something's off. Paranoia suits you, Marla quipped, crossing her arms. But I'm guessing this isn't just your usual everybody's out to get us routine. Zephyr shot her a look that could peel paint. There's been chatter, unofficial, off-the-record kind of chatter. The best kind, Marla said, her interest piqued. What kind of chatter are we talking about? Zephyr leaned in, lowering his voice. Aliens, Marla blinked. Aliens. You mean the ones we've been trying to be friends with for the past decade? The very same, Zephyr muttered. Supposedly they're here as diplomats, but there's a whisper that some aren't who they claim to be. So they're what, undercover space fascists? Marla asked, a smirk playing on her lips. Or worse, opportunists in disguise looking to seize control of the spire, Zephyr replied, his expression grim. And if they manage that, it won't just be a diplomatic disaster. It'll be a death sentence for everyone tethered to this floating toothpick. Marla's smirk faded as the gravity of the situation settled in. Well, if that doesn't make the day interesting, I don't know what will. You should know by now I aim to please, Zephyr said, shrugging. Let's just keep our eyes open, yeah? They were interrupted by the sudden blare of the intercom, an announcement echoing through the control room with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Attention! Diplomatic guests are arriving, all hands to stations. Marla raised an eyebrow. Time to welcome the interstellar elite. Zephyr nodded, his cynical mask slipping back into place. Let's hope none of them brought a surprise party. He pushed off the console and headed for the bay where the diplomatic procession would begin. The docking bay of the Sky Spire was a chaos of people, technology, and bureaucratic red tape. As Zephyr and Marla stepped into the fray, they were met with the sight of various alien delegates disembarking from shuttlecrafts, each one more bizarre than the last. And I thought the UN was weird, Marla muttered, eyeing a particularly gelatinous ambassador who seemed to be having trouble with gravity. Keep it together, Zephyr said, his eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. Remember, we're looking for the oddballs among the oddballs. Marla snorted. So, business as usual then. The procession was a spectacle of interstellar diplomacy, colorful robes, intricate headgear, and translators buzzing with the thrill of translating diplomatic nonsense into comprehensible nonsense. Zephyr's eyes, however, focused beyond the surface glitter, watching for the slip, the tell, the giveaway that spelled trouble. It was during this spectacle of goodwill and thinly veiled threats that Zephyr's gaze caught something, a slight twitch in the demeanor of an otherwise perfectly composed delegate. They were tall, with shimmering scales and an overly enthusiastic smile that could light up a dead planet. But Zephyr saw it, the brief flicker of unease, the quick glance over their shoulder. "Marla," he murmured, nodding subtly towards the scaly diplomat. "See that?" Marla followed his gaze, frowning. "The one who looks like they'd rather be anywhere else." "Exactly. Keep them under the microscope." As the summit carried on with all the grace of a drunken ballet, Zephyr kept his attention divided between the formalities and the potential threat in their midst. The stakes were high, and failure wasn't an option. "Zeph," Marla's voice crackled in his earpiece, "I've got eyes on our slippery friend. They're heading for the restricted section." Zephyr's heart rate kicked up a notch. "On my way," he replied, cutting through the throng of oblivious diplomats. Nobody noticed him slip away. They were too busy pretending they liked each other. He navigated the corridors with practiced ease, his mind racing with possibilities. If this was an alien infiltration, why here? Why now? The timing was too perfect, an opportunity too convenient to be ignored. He rounded the corner, spotting Marla lurking in the shadows, her eyes fixed on the suspect. "There," she whispered, gesturing towards the diplomat who was doing a terrible job of blending in. "Let's see what they've got up their sleeve," Zephyr said, moving forward with Marla at his side. The alien paused before a secured doorway, casting a furtive glance around. Zephyr and Marla ducked out of sight, holding their breath as they watched the diplomat pull out a device, deftly hacking the lock with fingers that moved too quickly and confidently for a mere guest. "Gotcha," Zephyr muttered, signaling for Marla to follow as they crept closer. The door slid open, and the diplomat slipped inside. Zephyr and Marla exchanged a glance, the unspoken understanding clear between them. They followed, silent as shadows. Inside, the room was a stark contrast to the polished outer corridors. It was bare, functional, and dominated by a central console that thrummed with energy. The diplomat approached it with a sense of purpose that sent alarms ringing in Zephyr's head. "Stay back," Zephyr whispered to Marla, inching closer to the diplomat, ready to confront them. The alien's fingers danced across the console, inputting commands with a proficiency that spoke of familiarity. Zephyr tensed, adrenaline coursing through him. This was it, the proof he needed. "Step away from the console," Zephyr ordered, his voice cutting through the tense silence like a blade. The diplomat froze, their disguise slipping for a fraction of a second, a flicker of scales, a momentary glimpse of something other beneath the surface. "Commander Halloway," the diplomat said, turning slowly with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "What a pleasant surprise." "I doubt that," Zephyr replied, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "What are you doing here?" The alien chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding. "Just ensuring this summit goes smoothly. By breaking into restricted areas and tampering with our systems," Marla added, stepping into view with her own sidearm drawn. The diplomat's smile widened, eyes glinting with mischief and malice. "Oh, Commander, you have no idea what's at stake here." Zephyr felt a chill run down his spine. "Why don't you enlighten us?" The alien took a step forward, confidence radiating from every scale. "The universe is a big place, Commander, and not everyone is content with sharing it." "Is that a threat?" Marla asked, her tone as sharp as her gaze. "A warning," the diplomat corrected, seemingly unruffled by the weapons pointed their way. "There are forces at play here that would see your precious spire fall." Zephyr tightened his grip on his sidearm. "And you're one of them, I take it." The diplomat inclined their head. "Merely a participant in a larger game." "Well, consider this your invitation to sit out the rest of the match," Zephyr said, gesturing for Marla to cover him as he moved to restrain the alien. But the diplomat was quicker than they appeared. With a flick of their wrist, a concealed blade sprang into their hand, slicing through the air with deadly grace. Zephyr barely dodged, the blade missing him by a hair's breadth. "Damn it!" Marla shouted, firing a warning shot that ricocheted off the wall, forcing the diplomat to retreat. Zephyr lunged, grappling with the alien as they struggled for control. The diplomat fought with a ferocity that belied their earlier composure, their true nature revealed in the heat of the moment. Marla, Zephyr barked, trying to gain the upper hand as they wrestled. On it, she replied, moving in to assist, her movements precise and practiced. Together they overpowered the diplomat, pinning them to the ground. Zephyr's breath came in ragged gasps as he cuffed the aliens' hands behind their back. "You're going to tell us everything," Zephyr said, his voice a low growl. The diplomat chuckled, a sound filled with defiance. "You think you've won. This is just the beginning." Zephyr exchanged a look with Marla, both of them knowing the truth of those words. This was far from over. "Then we'll be ready for whatever comes next," Zephyr said, determination hardening his features. As they hauled the alien to their feet, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just stepped into a much larger game than they had intended. And the stakes were higher than any of them could have imagined. The diplomatic summit on the sky spire continued with all the elegance of a space walrus ballet, and just as much grace. Zephyr Halloway found herself knee-deep in bureaucratic nonsense, much like swimming through molasses without the sweet aftertaste. She maneuvered through the throng of delegates with the agility of a well-seasoned cynic, her eyes scanning for anything out of place, anything suspicious, like a diplomat slipping cyanide into the punch. "Zephyr, how much longer do we have to babysit these cosmic clowns?" Marla Quinn appeared beside her, wearing an expression that screamed, "I'd rather be anywhere but here." "Until they either sign something or blow us all to smithereens," Zephyr replied, glancing at her. "Whichever comes first." "Comforting," Marla said, her sarcasm as thick as the tension in the room. The summit was supposed to be a meeting of minds, but it felt more like a meeting of egos. The delegates were a mixed bag of alien races and humans, each one posturing and preening like peacocks on parade. The vestry flare was blinding, robes that could double as parachutes, headpieces that defied gravity, and translators pinging with the cacophony of diplomacy. "Have you seen Arlo?" Zephyr asked, trying to remember the last time she saw their resident tech guru. "I need him to check the comms. Make sure no one's turned the system into their personal propaganda channel. Last I saw, he was neck-deep in wires, muttering something about fixing the unfixable," Marla said, rolling her eyes. "Pretty sure he's about to marry his spanner." "Good. As long as he's tinkering and not causing an interstellar incident, we're fine." The intercom blared again, a sound that could wake the dead or, at the very least, irritate the living. "Attention, communications disruption detected. All technical personnel report to the control hub." "Speak of the devil," Zephyr muttered. "Let's go find our beloved tech nerd and see what fresh hell awaits." They weaved through the chaos of the docking bay, past aliens attempting to decipher human customs and humans desperately trying to not offend their alien guests. One wrong word, and they'd have a war on their hands, because nothing says peace talk like the potential for planetary annihilation. The control hub was a mess of screens, wires, and tech personnel scrambling to make sense of the disruption. At the center of the chaos was Arlo Vex, a man who looked like he'd rather be in a tech lab than facing the diplomatic clusterfuck of the century. "Arlo," Zephyr called, stepping over a bundle of cables. "What the hell's going on?" Arlo looked up, his hair a disheveled mess, eyes wide behind his glasses. "Ah, Commander, good news is we still have power. Bad news, someone or something is jamming our comms. It's like they've plugged a blender into our signal and set it to puree." "Any idea who might be responsible?" Marla asked, crossing her arms as she inspected the chaos. "Could be anyone," Arlo said, gesturing to the screens displaying static and distorted images. "The aliens us, a cosmic prankster with a bad sense of humor. Take your pick," Zephyr sighed, rubbing her temples. "Great, just what we need. More mysteries and no Scooby-Doo to solve them." "Isn't that what you're here for?" Arlo quipped, half smirking as he returned to his screens. "Remind me why we keep you around," Zephyr retorted, but her heart wasn't in it. She knew they needed his expertise now more than ever. "Because I'm the only one who knows how to fix this mess," Arlo replied, typing furiously. "And because you love me." "Keep telling yourself that," Marla said, shaking her head. As Arlo continued to work his magic, or attempted to, at least, Zephyr turned her attention to Mira Nix, the strategist for this circus of chaos. Mira was a woman who could turn a losing situation into a stalemate, and she was the closest thing they had to a miracle worker. "Mira, any thoughts on this mess?" Zephyr asked, joining the strategist at her console. Mira looked up from her data, her expression one of calculated calm. "If I had to guess, this is a distraction. Someone wants us looking at the shiny lights while they muck about in the shadows. And here I thought alien diplomacy was straightforward," Marla said with a snort. "Smile and wave," they said. "It'll be fun," they said. "Always a party until someone pulls the fire alarm," Mira replied, her eyes returning to her console. "I've got a list of suspects as long as my arm, but nothing concrete yet." Zephyr nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "Keep digging. We need to figure out who's behind this and why, before they turn the whole spire into their personal piñata." Mira gave a curt nod, already absorbed in the process of sifting through data, her mind working at a pace that would leave most people in the dust. As Zephyr turned to leave, the lights flickered ominously, a reminder that things could get a whole lot worse before they got better. "How about we avoid the whole exploding spire scenario, yeah?" Zephyr said, looking at her team with a grim smile. "I'd like to keep my head attached to my shoulders. And I'd like to not be vaporized before lunch," Marla added, glancing at her watch. "I'm starving." "Then let's get a move on," Zephyr said, heading towards the exit. "The sooner we find the culprit, the sooner we can get back to pretending this summit is anything more than a well-dressed farce." With that, they set off, leaving the control hub behind and diving back into the chaos of the summit. As they moved through the corridors, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The thought made her skin crawl, but she pushed it aside. Paranoia was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. The summit continued its plodding pace, oblivious to the potential catastrophe brewing beneath the surface. Zephyr and her team moved with purpose, scanning faces and exchanges, looking for the crack in the facade. It wasn't long before they found something. A group of delegates had gathered in a side chamber, their conversation hushed and intense. Zephyr signaled the others to follow as she slipped closer, straining to catch snippets of the conversation. "They're distracted, communications down, won't know what hit them," one of the delegates was saying, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Zephyr's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the confirmation she needed that something was seriously wrong. "Ready to crash the party?" Marla asked, her hand already inching towards her sidearm. "Always," Zephyr replied, nodding to Mira and Arlo to flank the group. "Let's see what secrets they're hiding." They moved in unison, stepping into the chamber with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were about to ruin someone's day. "Planning a surprise party, are we?" Zephyr said, her voice cutting through the conversation like a knife through butter. The delegates froze, their expressions shifting from shock to indignation, a sure sign they were caught with their hands in the cookie jar. "This is a private discussion," one of them said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "And I'm the Queen of Sheba," Marla shot back, eyes narrowing. "Now spill." The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches, the air practically crackling with the threat of violence. Zephyr stepped forward, her gaze locked on the delegate who seemed to be leading the group. "I suggest you start talking, unless you want Mira here to get creative with her interrogation techniques." Mira smiled, a gesture that was anything but friendly. "I've been told I have a knack for persuasion." The delegates exchanged uneasy glances, clearly weighing their options. Finally, the leader spoke, his voice tight with resignation. "We were merely discussing contingencies." "Contingencies for what?" Zephyr pressed, crossing her arms. "For when this summit inevitably fails," he admitted, a slight sneer twisting his lips. "None of us want to be caught unprepared. Or maybe you're planning to make sure it fails," Arlo interjected, his expression skeptical. The leader's eyes flashed with something dark, a mix of fear and defiance. "You don't understand. There are forces at work here that will see to it regardless of our actions." "And you're helping them?" Zephyr asked, incredulous. "Why?" Survival, the leader said simply. When the universe decides to rearrange the furniture, you make sure you're not under the couch. Zephyr felt a cold certainty settle in her gut. This was bigger than a simple diplomatic spat. There was a conspiracy at play, and it was one they couldn't afford to ignore. "You're going to tell us everything," Zephyr said, her voice hard as steel. "Names, plans, the whole damn lot. You think I'll just hand it over?" the delegate scoffed. "You will," Mira said, stepping forward with a glint in her eye that promised pain, "because the alternative will be far less pleasant." There was a long pause, the air thick with the weight of impending decisions. Finally, the delegate nodded, his defiance unraveling like a cheap rug. "Fine. I'll tell you what I know." As the information began to spill out, Zephyr felt a mix of relief and dread. They were closer to uncovering the truth, but with every answer came more questions, and the shadow of what lay ahead loomed large. The stakes were higher than they'd imagined, and failure wasn't an option. But then, when was it ever? Zephyr Halloway rubbed her temples, feeling like she was trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together in zero gravity, blindfolded. The diplomatic summit at the Sky Spire was supposed to be the crown jewel of human-alien relations, but right now, it felt more like a cheap tiara with missing gemstones. Delegates were acting like kindergartners during recess. The comms were on the fritz, and someone's idea of a practical joke involved turning the spire into a potential death trap. Just another Tuesday in space. Glancing around the control hub, Zephyr took in the scene. Arlo still wrestling with technology like it owed him money, Marla with her perpetual smirk, and Mira, the only one who looked like she knew what she was doing. They were her team, and her best shot at keeping the whole shebang from going supernova. "Right," Zephyr said, taking a deep breath. "We've got a bunch of bureaucrats who couldn't find their way out of a paper bag, and aliens who think a handshake is an act of war. Suggestions." Marla leaned against a console, arms crossed. "Well, we could let them sort it out themselves and start selling tickets. Call it Intergalactic Gladiators live from the Sky Spire." Arlo chuckled, still tapping away at his keyboard. "Better make it pay-per-view." "Gotta fund my coffee addiction somehow." Or Mira suggested with a rare hint of amusement, "We could stop the spire from turning us into cosmic debris." "Just a thought." Always the voice of reason, Zephyr sighed. "All right, let's focus on keeping this bucket of bolts from falling apart." "Arlo, any progress on the comms?" Arlo shook his head, frustration etched across his face. "Every time I think I've got it, the system laughs in my face. It's like playing chess with an octopus. Too many arms and no idea what it's doing." "Keep at it," Zephyr said. "We need to know what's happening out there." "And in here," Marla added, nodding towards the hodgepodge of humanity and alien life forms bustling around the spire. "I'm starting to think some of our esteemed guests are playing both sides of the chessboard." "Paranoia suits you," Zephyr replied. "But you might be right. If someone's screwing with us, we need to find them before things get messy." "Messier, you mean," Mira corrected, eyes scanning a data pad. "We're already knee-deep in complications. Every delegate has an agenda and none of them involve peace." A soft chime interrupted their conversation, drawing their attention to the main screen. One of the delegates, an Earth representative with an ego as big as the spire, was requesting communication. "Here we go," Marla muttered, rolling her eyes. "Let the games begin." Zephyr activated the screen and the delegate's face appeared, already twisted in annoyance. "Commander Halloway, I must protest this appalling situation. I demand to know when our communications will be restored." "Working on it," Zephyr replied with all the enthusiasm of a dentist making a house call. "Our tech team's on it." The delegate huffed, his expression making it clear he thought himself a very important man. "This summit is crucial to Earth's future. We cannot afford delays." "Well, sir," Zephyr said, her tone dripping with sarcasm, "if you'd like to crawl through the ducts and fix it yourself, be my guest." The delegate's face turned a shade of red usually reserved for overripe tomatoes. "I assure you, Commander, this will be reflected in my report. Can't wait to read it," Zephyr said, cutting the connection before he could whine further. "Annoying git, think he'll send it with little hearts over the eyes," Marla quipped. "If we're lucky," Zephyr replied, turning back to her team. Everyone loves fan mail. Arlo's attention was fixed on his monitors again, his expression shifting from frustration to a frown of concentration. "Got something," he said, tapping a few keys. "Looks like someone's been poking around in our systems. Left a trail, it's faint, but it's there." "Finally, a lead," Zephyr said, her heart picking up pace. "Can you trace it?" "Already on it," Arlo replied, his fingers a blur. "Whoever did this is good, but I'm better. Just need a bit more time." "Time is something we don't have," Mira pointed out. "If the sabotage continues, we're looking at more than a diplomatic disaster. Then we better move fast," Zephyr said, glancing at Marla. "Keep an eye on the delegates. See if anyone's acting more suspicious than usual. With this crowd, that's like asking me to find the least obnoxious person at a politician's convention," Marla replied, but she nodded, understanding the urgency. Zephyr felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They were running out of options, and the chances of pulling a miracle out of thin air were slim. But she wasn't about to give up, not when lives were at stake. The intercom crackled, a voice cutting through the hubbub of the control room. "Attention all personnel, power fluctuations detected in sectors 3, 5, and 7. Engineers are en route." "Great," Zephyr muttered. "That's all we need, more technical issues. Coincidence?" Mira asked, her tone skeptical. "I doubt it," Arlo replied, not looking up from his screen. "Whoever's behind this isn't just messing with comms, they're going for the whole enchilada. Let's make sure they don't get to dessert," Zephyr said, determination threading her voice. Arlo, keep digging. Mira, coordinate with the engineers. Let's make sure we're not sitting on a ticking time bomb. Got it, Mira replied, already tapping into her console. And Marla, Zephyr added, try not to shoot anyone unless absolutely necessary. No promises, Marla said with a grin, already heading for the door. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Zephyr couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. They had a lead. A small one, true, but it was better than nothing. With luck, they'd unravel the conspiracy before it could wrap them up in it. The spire was a maze of corridors, each one looking exactly like the last, an endless loop of gray walls and flickering lights. Zephyr maneuvered through it like a rat in a lab experiment, hoping not to end up as someone's failed hypothesis. Elsewhere, the delegates were still engaged in their diplomatic dance, posturing and preening like peacocks on parade. It would have been amusing if it weren't so damn dangerous. Reaching the engineer station, Zephyr found Mira already deep in conversation with the head engineer, a grizzled veteran named Rix. He looked like he'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. "I've rerouted power flows to stabilize the fluctuations," Rix was saying, his voice gruff. "But if the saboteur strikes again, we'll be back to square one. Any idea where the next hit might be?" Zephyr asked, leaning against the console. "Your guess is as good as mine," Rix replied, scratching his chin. "But if they keep targeting key systems, we could be looking at a full shutdown." "Can't let that happen," Zephyr said, feeling the urgency ratchet up another notch. "Keep your team on high alert. We need to stay one step ahead." "I'll do my best," Rix promised, though his expression was doubtful. "Just hope it's enough." Zephyr nodded, knowing full well what was riding on their success. "We'll get through this," she said, though it sounded more like a plea than a promise. Leaving the engineers to their work, Zephyr rejoined Mira, who was scanning through reports with the intensity of a hawk hunting prey. "Anything useful?" Zephyr asked. "Nothing concrete," Mira admitted. "But I've got eyes everywhere. If someone so much as sneezes suspiciously, we'll know." Zephyr managed a grim smile. Damn allergies. Always ruining a good conspiracy. They continued their rounds, the atmosphere in the spire growing more tense with every passing minute. It was like waiting for a storm to hit, knowing it was coming but unable to do anything to stop it. Finally, a message from Arlo broke the oppressive silence. "Commander, I've got a location." The signals coming from the lower levels near the environmental controls. Zephyr felt a surge of adrenaline. "You're sure?" "Positive," Arlo confirmed. If we hurry, we might catch the saboteur in the act. Then let's move, Zephyr said, already heading for the nearest lift. Mira, alert security. I want backup ready in case things get ugly. Consider it done, Mira replied, her fingers flying over her device. As they descended, the tension in the lift was palpable. Zephyr could feel her heart pounding, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was it, the break they'd been waiting for. The lift doors opened with a hiss, revealing a dimly lit corridor that stretched into the shadows. Zephyr led the way, her senses on high alert. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional hum of machinery. They reached the environmental controls, where a single figure was hunched over a console, oblivious to their presence. Zephyr signaled for silence, creeping forward with her weapon at the ready. "All right, hands where I can see them," she barked, stepping into the light. The figure froze, then slowly turned, hands raised. It was one of the alien delegates, their expression a mix of fear and defiance. "Caught you red-handed," Marla said, appearing at Zephyr's side. "Care to explain?" The alien blinked, their translator warbling as it struggled to convey their response. I was merely ensuring the summit's success. With sabotage," Zephyr demanded, skepticism dripping from her words. No, the alien protested. "I was trying to prevent a disaster. There are factions that wish to see the summit fail, to spark chaos, and you're not one of them." Mira asked, skeptical. "I wish for peace," the alien assured them, their eyes wide. "But there are others, those who would benefit from instability." Zephyr exchanged a glance with Marla, both of them weighing the alien's words. It was possible they were telling the truth, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. "All right," Zephyr said, lowering her weapon slightly. "You're coming with us. We'll sort this out back at the hub." The alien nodded, relief washing over their features. "Thank you. I will cooperate." As they made their way back, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. The pieces were there, but the picture remained elusive, like trying to see through a fog that wouldn't lift. But one thing was certain. They were running out of time, and the fate of the Sky Spire, and everyone on it, hung in the balance. The lift hummed to a halt and disgorged Zephyr, Marla, Mira, and their alien detainee onto the chaotic dance floor of the Sky Spire's main hub. The alien, a cerulean-skinned fellow with a bulbous head, tried to blend in with the delegates, who were, as usual, pretending to be important while engaging in the diplomatic equivalent of a kindergarten scuffle over the best crayons. "Welcome back to the circus," Marla quipped, "where the clowns are always willing to juggle their way to disaster." The alien delegate, who'd introduced himself as Caliph during the lift ride, peered at the colorful melee with a mix of disdain and something that might have been envy or indigestion. Hard to tell with aliens. Zephyr was about to shove Caliph straight into the hands of security when the lights flickered, dimmed to an ominous glow, then blinked back to life with the enthusiasm of a narcoleptic night watchman. "Perfect," Zephyr muttered, teeth clenched. "Nothing like a light show to keep everyone on edge." "Power fluctuations," Mira noted dryly, not missing a beat as she scanned the room. "The saboteur's still at it." Caliph raised a bony finger. "If I may interject." "No, you may not," Zephyr cut in, waving him off. "Save the excuse for when we've got more than a flashlight party to deal with." Arlo's voice crackled over the intercom, laced with static and stress. "Commander, additional spikes in sectors 2 and 6. Systems are going mad. I've got engineers running around like headless chickens down here. See if you can make some headless omelets while you're at it," Zephyr shot back. "I've got a feeling we'll need some comfort food soon." "You got it, boss," Arlo replied, deadpan. Caliph cleared his throat with a sound like a drain unclogging. "I truly am on your side." "The factions, quiet," Zephyr snapped, scanning the crowd with the intensity of a hawk spotting a particularly annoying pigeon. "We know there's more going on here." Marla nudged Zephyr, nodding towards a group of delegates who appeared to be discussing something with all the subtlety of a pack of wolves deciding on dinner. "Looks like our friends over there are having a chat about something more than the weather." Zephyr squinted, recognizing a few of the faces, humans and aliens alike, all with that peculiar look of people who believe they are the smartest ones in the room. Pity they were in the same room as Marla. "Let's see if we can crash their little party," Zephyr said, already weaving through the crowd with Marla and Mira flanking her like surly bookends. Caliph trailed behind, looking like a child caught in a candy store without any money. "Commander Holloway, please. I implore you to—" "Shut it, Caliph," Zephyr said over her shoulder. "We've got bigger fish to fry." Or aliens, as the case may be. As they closed in, one of the delegates, a human named Darnell, caught sight of them and plastered on a smile that was pure politician, shiny, false, and about as sincere as a snake oil salesman. "Commander Holloway, what a pleasure to see you again," Darnell exclaimed, arms wide as if expecting a hug. He got a glare instead. "Spare me the theatrics, Darnell. What's going on here?" "Just discussing some contingency plans," Darnell replied, his grin slipping a notch. "Given the technical difficulties, we thought it prudent to explore all avenues, right? Because nothing says exploring avenues like whispering in a corner," Zephyr said, her voice flat as a neutron star. "What's the real story?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Darnell's face, and his gaze slid to the alien beside him, a tall, spindly creature with eyes like black pools. The alien shifted, looking distinctly uncomfortable under Zephyr's scrutiny. "Commander, I assure you, we're all working towards the same goal," the alien said, their voice a low, liquid murmur. "Funny because it looks like you're working towards making things worse," Marla cut in, crossing her arms. "And we don't have time for your posturing." Caliph took a step forward, desperation in his eyes. "These are the factions I warned you about. They have their own agendas, their own—" "Really, Caliph?" Zephyr interrupted, her patience wearing thinner than the last strand of hope. "Why didn't you mention that before we dragged you along?" "Save it," Mira said, eyes narrowing at the group. "We need answers, not excuses." The alien beside Darnell shifted nervously. "There are those who benefit from chaos," it admitted reluctantly. "For some, the summit's failure would be a boon. Great. So we've got saboteurs and opportunists all in the same room," Zephyr sighed. "And here I thought we'd just have to deal with dinner etiquette." "I assure you it's not as dire as it seems," Darnell said, but his voice lacked conviction. Zephyr had heard enough. "Mira, get security to escort these jokers to a secure area. We'll sort out who's who later." Caliph looked relieved, nodding vigorously. Yes, secure area." "Good idea. Shame we don't have a padded room," Marla murmured as Mira relayed instructions to security. "Could have thrown a party." As security arrived to corral the group, Zephyr turned her attention back to the bigger issue, the imminent collapse of the Spire's systems. "Arlo, status update," Zephyr barked into her comms. "Still tracing the signal, Commander," Arlo replied, his voice grim. "But every time I get close, something else goes haywire. It's like playing whack-a-mole with a blindfold on." "Keep at it," Zephyr ordered. "We've got to stop this before the whole Spire goes dark." "Working on it," Arlo said. "But unless you've got a magic wand hidden somewhere, it's gonna take time." Zephyr knew Arlo was doing his best, but time was the one luxury they didn't have. She glanced over at Marla, who was watching the proceedings with a look of bored amusement. "Marla, any bright ideas?" Zephyr asked, trying to keep the edge of desperation out of her voice. "I dunno, maybe try turning it off and on again," Marla suggested with a smirk. "Or have we hit that stage where we just start sacrificing tech gods?" "Let's hold off on the sacrifices for now," Zephyr replied dryly. "I'd rather not have to explain that to the higher-ups. We could use Caliph as the sacrificial goat," Marla said, nodding towards the alien who was now being ushered away with the rest of the suspects. Zephyr chuckled despite herself. "Let's keep it as Plan B." The lights flickered again, and the intercom sputtered to life once more. "Commander, we've got an unidentified ship approaching the Spire." "No response to hails, of course we do," Zephyr muttered, rubbing her temples. "The hits just kept on coming. Scramble fighters. No one gets near the Spire without our say-so." "Understood, Commander," came the brisk response. "Think it's related. Marla asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. In this circus. Damn straight, Zephyr replied, heading back to the command center. Let's find out what else is gonna try and kill us today. Back in the command center, the tension was a tangible thing, pressing down on everyone with the weight of 1,000 inconvenient truths. Zephyr took her place at the helm, eyes locked on the screens as they displayed the approaching ship, a dark blot against the star-speckled void. Arlo, can you get eyes on that ship? Zephyr asked, her fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the console. Trying, Arlo replied, his voice tight. But the sensors are all over the place thanks to our friendly neighborhood saboteur. Great, Zephyr said, watching the ship's trajectory. It was coming in fast, too fast. I want every available defense option primed and ready. No chances. As the team worked to boost the Spire's defenses, Mira slipped into the seat beside Zephyr, her face a mask of calm determination. Think they're here to finish what they started? Mira asked quietly. Wouldn't surprise me, Zephyr replied. But we're not gonna let that happen. No, we're not, Mira agreed, her voice firm. We've come too far to let some trigger-happy jackasses ruin everything. Damn right, Zephyr said, feeling a surge of resolve. And if they want to fight, they'll have to get through us first. As the ship drew closer, the comms crackled to life with a hail from one of the fighter pilots. Commander, this is Echo 1. We've got a visual on the bogey. Looks like a modified freighter armed to the teeth. Fantastic, Zephyr said dryly. What's their play? They are holding course, but we're picking up energy spikes. Could be weapons charging, Echo 1 reported. Zephyr's mind raced, weighing options. They couldn't afford a firefight here, not with the Spire's systems hanging by a thread. Echo 1, hold position but be ready to engage on my command, Zephyr ordered. Let's see if they've got the guts to make the first move. Copy that, Commander, Echo 1 replied. Holding position. The screens flickered to a live feed of the ship, its silhouette stark against the void. It was close enough now that Zephyr could make out the details, an old freighter, retrofitted with enough firepower to make a battleship blush. Marla, get me some intel on that damn thing, Zephyr said, nodding towards the ship. On it, Marla replied, fingers flying over her console. It's not subtle, I'll give it that. Looks like it's been through a few battles. Any idea who it belongs to? Zephyr asked, watching the ship with eyes that missed nothing. No transponder, typical pirate tech, Marla said, her voice a mix of disdain and amusement. But I'd bet my last credit they're not here to sell us cookies. Well, they picked the wrong Girl Scouts to mess with, Zephyr growled. Echo 1, you're clear to engage if they so much as breathe funny. Roger that, Commander, Echo 1 responded, the tension palpable even over the comms. Everything was poised on a knife's edge, the kind of situation where one wrong move could send everything spiraling into chaos. Zephyr could almost hear the ticking of an invisible clock, counting down to the moment when all hell would break loose. And then it did. The ship veered sharply, weapons flaring to life in a blaze of unnatural light. Echo 1 and the other fighters sprang into action, missiles streaking through the void in response. Zephyr was on her feet, voice slicing through the chaos. All teams' defensive maneuvers. Now, Mira was already coordinating with the defense stations, her commands crisp and precise. Point defense systems online. Intercepting incoming fire. The Spire shuddered as energy beams lashed out, striking the shields with a force that rattled bones and frayed nerves. Keep us steady. Zephyr shouted, her focus unyielding. We're not gonna let them take us down. As the battle raged outside, a sudden realization struck her, a piece of the puzzle sliding into place. The sabotage, the factions, the incoming ship, it was all connected. But what was the endgame? Marla, get me everything you've got on this ship's point of origin, Zephyr demanded, the urgency of the moment sharpening her resolve. Already working on it, Marla replied, her voice laced with determination. The screens flickered with data, coordinates flashing across the display like a cosmic breadcrumb trail. They're coming from a location near the old mining colonies, Marla reported, eyes narrowing as she pieced together the clues. Zepha's mind raced. The colonies were a known hotbed of unrest, a breeding ground for dissidents and dark dealings. If the ship had ties there, it meant something bigger was at play, something they hadn't seen coming. Echo 1, focus fire on their weapons systems. We need to disable them, not destroy, Zepha ordered, the plan forming in her mind. We need answers, not debris. Copy that, Commander, Echo 1 acknowledged. Executing the maneuver Sky Spire was a monument to human ambition, which was precisely why it was falling apart at the seams. The tower systems were collapsing faster than Zepha's patience, and now, with a pirate ship breathing down their necks, she was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, it was time to invest in a less explosive line of work, like lion taming, or playing chicken with black holes. The command center was a mess of frantic voices and flashing lights. It reminded Zepha of the time her brother tried to host a birthday party for his 6-year-old twins and a pack of hyperactive puppies. Only this time, there were fewer puppies and more impending doom. Commander, we've lost another sensor array. Arlo's voice crackled over the comms, sounding like a man who could really use a vacation. And the backup power grid is flickering like a damn strobe light. Why don't you just tell me the oxygen's running out while you're at it? Zepha snapped. Because I could really use some good news. Not yet, Arlo replied, managing a chuckle despite the chaos. But I'll keep it in mind. Zepha resisted the urge to bang her head against the nearest console. Marla, how are we looking on defenses? About as good as a noodle strainer in a hurricane, Marla replied, not missing a beat. If that ship decides to open fire again, it's gonna carve us up like holiday roast. Well, I always thought traditional holidays were overrated, Zepha muttered, her eyes glued to the tactical display. But I'd rather not celebrate Ior's being turned into a debris field. The approaching ship loomed larger on the screen, and Zepha felt the weight of leadership pressing down on her shoulders like a lead blanket. This situation was spiraling, and she needed a plan, a damn good one that wouldn't end in a vacuum funeral. Echo 1, status update. Zepha barked into her headset, hoping for some spark of hope. Ship still holding its position, Commander, came Echo 1's response. But they've deployed drones. They're circling like vultures. Lovely, Zepha grumbled. Tell them if they want to dance, we're more than ready to tango. Copy that, Echo 1 replied, with a tone that suggested they were as ready to tango as a bear was to do ballet. The command center shuddered under another round of impacts, the spire's defenses straining against the barrage. Zepha's mind raced as she tried to keep up with the rapidly deteriorating situation. If they could hold out just a little longer, maybe they'd have a chance. Mira, get those point defenses up. We need to hold them off until we can regroup, Zepha ordered, her voice steady despite the rising tension. Mira nodded, her fingers dancing across the console with precision. I've got it, Commander. We'll keep them at bay. Zepha knew she could count on Mira, a steady hand in a storm of chaos. One of the few she trusted to hold the line when the chips were down. Marla, get me a read on our remaining assets, Zepha continued, assessing their dwindling resources. Marla tapped away at her console, her expression one of grim determination. Well, we've got 2 operational fighter squads, half a dozen drones, and a partridge in a pear tree. But no guarantee they can hold out forever. Then we'll have to make do with what we have, Zepha said, more to herself than anyone else. The relentless assault continued, the tower shuddering as it took blow after blow. Zepha tried to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. Morale was dropping faster than a lead balloon, and she couldn't afford to let it sink any lower. She needed to rally her team, remind them why they fought. Everyone, listen up. Zepha called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. We didn't sign up for easy, and we damn well aren't backing down now. We're gonna show these bastards what happens when you corner a human. Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. Around her the team responded with renewed vigor, their movements sharper and more focused. It was a small victory, but in times like these, you took what you could get. As Zepha tried to maintain control, her mind drifted back to the saboteur. Someone among them had set this all in motion, and the thought twisted in her gut like a bad hangover. There was a traitor in their midst, and she was determined to root them out. "Marla, any new intel from our guests?" Zephyr asked, nodding towards the detention area. "Just the usual denials, excuses, and more finger-pointing than an accusatory mob," Marla replied with a cynical snort. "If we're lucky, maybe one of them will crack before we do." Zephyr allowed herself a small smirk. "Here's hoping." In the meantime, let's keep our eyes peeled for any more surprises. The minutes dragged by, a test of endurance against the onslaught of chaos. Zephyr refused to let up, barking orders and coordinating defenses with a single-minded determination. "Echo 1, focus on those drones," Zephyr commanded, her resolve unyielding. "We need to clear the skies before we can think about counterattacks." "Roger that, Commander," Echo 1 confirmed, their fighters weaving through the void with practiced precision. As the battle raged on, Zephyr felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her pushing forward. They hadn't been beaten yet, and she'd be damned if she let a bunch of pirates and a faulty tower bring them down. "Commander, we've managed to get some of the secondary systems back online," Arlo reported, a hint of excitement in his voice. "It's not much, but it'll help." "Good work, Arlo," Zephyr replied, feeling a surge of pride in her team. "Keep it up. Every little bit counts." The Spire's systems groaned under the strain, but they held. For now, at least. Zephyr knew they couldn't hold out forever, but she also knew that sometimes all you needed was a little time to turn the tide. "Marla, any sign of reinforcements?" Zephyr asked, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. "Not yet," Marla replied, her tone both hopeful and resigned. "But I'm sending out a distress signal. Maybe someone will take pity on us, or come to pick through the wreckage," Zephyr quipped, though her heart wasn't in it. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. Zephyr tried to ignore the growing sense of dread gnawing at her insides. The spire was still intact, but for how much longer? "Commander, we've got a problem," Mira said suddenly, her voice tight. "I'm picking up movement in the lower levels." "Unauthorized access. Could be an infiltration, of course there is," Zephyr muttered, her mind racing. "Can we seal off those sections?" "Already working on it," Mira replied, her fingers a blur across the console. "But if they've already breached the lower levels, we might be in for more than just a firefight." Zephyr bit back a curse. This was the last thing they needed, a knife in the back while they were fighting off the vultures at the front. "Arlo, can you reroute any security feeds?" "We need eyes down there," Zephyr ordered, her mind a flurry of calculations. "Doing my best, Commander, but the systems are still unstable," Arlo replied, frustration lacing his words. "It's like trying to knit with spaghetti." "Then keep knitting, Arlo," Zephyr said, her tone brooking no argument. Every bit of intel helps. The tension in the command center ratcheted up a notch, the air thick with anticipation and unease. Zephyr knew they were being stretched to their limits, and she couldn't shake the feeling they were missing something crucial. "Marla, what's the status on those fighters?" Zephyr asked, her eyes scanning the displays for any sign of an opening. "Still holding position, but they're taking hits," Marla replied, her expression grim. "We need to do something before they are overwhelmed." Zephyr nodded, her mind racing. They needed to turn the tide, but with resources dwindling and systems failing, their options were limited. But limited didn't mean non-existent. "We're not beaten yet," Zephyr declared, her voice a rallying cry. "We've got one last shot, so let's make it count." Her words sparked a renewed sense of purpose among the crew, a determination to fight tooth and nail until the bitter end. "All right, people, here's the plan," Zephyr said, her mind a whirl of strategies and contingencies. "We're gonna hit them where it hurts and show them just how stubborn we can be." The team sprang into action, their movements a flurry of determination and grit. They might have been outmatched, but they weren't out of the fight, not yet. As the battle raged on outside, Zephyr felt a fierce pride in her crew. They were the misfits, the underdogs, the ones who refused to roll over and die. And if anyone thought they could waltz in and destroy what they'd built, they were in for a rude awakening. The The spire groaned under the strain, but it held. Somehow, against all odds, it held. And as Zephyr prepared to lead her team into the fray, she couldn't help but smile, because sometimes survival was victory enough. The command center was a chorus of chaos, a symphony of alarms and the occasional colorful curse. If any of the alien delegates from the summit could see the human command center now, they'd probably rethink the whole diplomatic relations idea and stick to sending passive-aggressive emails across the stars. Zephyr Halloway stood at the center of this mess, feeling like the ringmaster of a particularly unruly circus. Speaking of which, she needed to get in touch with her favorite magician Arlo, who was busy trying to pull a rabbit or a miracle out of his hat. "Arlo, give me something good," Zephyr called out, her voice cutting through the din like a knife. And by good, I mean not a death certificate. Arlo's face popped up on the nearest screen, looking like he'd been through a blender set on frappe. "Commander, you're gonna love this," he said with a grin that suggested anything but love was coming her way. "Hit me. I found a hidden protocol buried in the Spire's systems. It's called Project Phoenix. Don't ask why someone named it after a mythical bird that burns itself alive. Couldn't they have gone with something less ominous?" Zephyr interrupted. Like Project Slightly Toasty, Arlo chuckled, a brief respite from the storm. "Anyway, it's a last resort measure designed to reboot the entire power grid and systems, effectively resetting the Spire. But here's the kicker. It requires a manual override from the lower levels, which, as you know, are currently enjoying a hostile takeover." Zephyr rubbed her temples, wishing she could rub away the headache that came with leading a team of misfits against the galaxy's worst. "So, let me get this straight. We need to send someone into the lion's den to flip a switch, all while dodging whatever alien surprises are lurking down there, pretty much. Oh, and there's about a 60% chance it'll fry whoever's in there." "Great odds," Zephyr said, dry as desert sand. "I've always wanted to play Russian roulette with a broken revolver." Marla, not one to miss out on a good grim joke, chimed in. "So who's drawing the short straw, or do we just pick the least popular team member?" Zephyr's eyes swept over her crew, taking in their determination and, more importantly, their expendability. "We'll draw lots, but before we do, I want options. How do we make this suicide mission less suicidal?" Marla tapped a button and displayed the schematics for the lower levels on the screen. "We could try sending a drone to scout ahead, maybe clear out any unwanted guests before we send in the sacrificial lamb. Sounds like a plan." "Let's see if we can keep this barbecue from turning into a bonfire," Zephyr replied, turning to Mira. "Any luck sealing off those sections?" "Somewhat," Mira said, chewing her lip as she scanned her console. "But these intruders are slippery bastards. If we don't move fast, they'll burrow through our defenses like termites on a sugar rush." Zephyr nodded, trying to keep the frustration from seeping into her voice. "Okay, Mira, keep them busy. Marla, prep a drone for recon. And Arlo, get ready to walk someone through Project Phoenix, preferably without turning them into a crispy critter." As they worked, the command center echoed with the clatter of keyboards and the hum of machinery on its last legs. Zephyr watched her team move with a precision born out of desperation and a stubborn refusal to die quietly. "All right, everyone, listen up," Zephyr said, clapping her hands to get their attention. "We're about to play a very dangerous game of hide and seek. Marla, you've got control of the drone. Mira, keep those intruders on their toes. And Arlo, you're our guide through this mess. I want everyone sharp and ready to move at a moment's notice. Let's show these bastards why humans shouldn't be underestimated." The members of the crew answered with nods and grim smiles, their resolve as steely as their commanders. Zephyr felt a surge of pride. These were her people, her crew, and together they'd either live to tell this tale or haunt the annals of history as cautionary ghosts. "Marla, send the drone in," Zephyr ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The drone zipped away, a small, buzzing harbinger of hope. Its tiny cameras transmitted a view of the lower levels that was anything but inviting. Shadows danced across the screen and figures moved with an unsettling grace, their motives as clear as mud. "Looks like we've got company down there," Marla commented, squinting at the display. "And they're not here to borrow sugar, any obvious weak points?" Zephyr asked, leaning over the console. "Not unless you count their fashion sense," Marla quipped. "But we might be able to use the ventilation system to navigate around them." "Great, because navigating through air ducts with armed aliens sounds like a walk in the park," Zephyr said. "Arlo, you ready to guide us through this?" "As ready as I'll ever be, Commander," Arlo replied, his usual humor tinged with a serious edge. "Okay, then let's draw lots and pick our lucky volunteer." As Zephyr spread the straws on the table, a silence fell over the command center, a still moment in the eye of the storm. Each member approached, drawing their fate with a mix of dread and determination. It was Mira who drew the short straw. She looked at it, then up at Zephyr with a resigned smile. "Guess I was due for some excitement." "Mira, you don't have to do this," Zephyr said, her voice lacking the usual hard edge. "Someone's got to, and I'd rather it be someone who knows their way around a console," Mira replied, her tone firm. "Besides, I've always wanted to see what being a hero feels like." Zephyr nodded, clapping her on the shoulder. "All right, Mira. Let's get you suited up." In short order, Mira was ready. She stood at the hatch leading to the lower levels, a mix of nerves and adrenaline evident on her face. Zephyr met her eyes, offering a nod of encouragement. "Remember, you're not alone down there," Zephyr said. "We've got you covered from up here." "I'll hold you to that," Mira replied with a wink, then disappeared into the hatch. As Mira descended, the command center's tension ratcheted up another notch. Zephyr watched the display, her heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. "Marla, keep that drone on her 6, Zephyr ordered, eyes glued to the feed. "On it, Commander," Marla replied, her fingers dancing across the console. Mira moved through the dimly lit corridors with the grace of a cat burglar, her movements calculated and precise. Each step echoed in the silence, a reminder of the danger she faced. "All right, Mira," Arlo's voice crackled over the comms, a lifeline in the darkness. "You're gonna want to take the next left. The control room should be just ahead." "Copy that," Mira whispered, her voice steady despite the fear thrumming beneath. The drone buzzed above, its cameras sweeping the area for any signs of trouble. But the shadows were as impenetrable as ever, hiding whatever lurked within. As Mira approached the control room, her heart thudded against her rib cage. She pressed her back to the wall, peeking around the corner to assess the situation. Her breath caught in her throat at the sight of 2 alien figures stationed at the entrance, their postures alert and ready. 2 guards at the door, Arlo. "Suggestions?" Mira breathed, retreating back into the shadows. "Wish I had some invisibility cloaks handy," Arlo replied, a weak attempt at humor. "But you might be able to use that ventilation shaft to get inside. Because crawling through tiny spaces is my favorite pastime," Mira muttered, glancing at the narrow opening. "Hey, think of it as a crash diet," Marla chimed in, ever the optimist. Mira rolled her eyes, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the circumstances. "All right, I'm going in." The vent was a tight fit, and every movement sent metallic clangs echoing down the shaft. Mira held her breath, praying that the noise wouldn't draw any unwanted attention. She emerged on the other side, slipping into the control room with silent steps. The console was a mess of buttons and switches, a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Arlo, I'm in. Now what?" Mira whispered, her eyes scanning the array of controls. "Okay, there should be a panel on the far right. You'll need to manually override the system and then—" "Well, try not to die," Arlo instructed, his voice a mix of tension and encouragement. "Simple enough," Mira replied, her hand hovering over the controls. With a deep breath, she began the sequence, fingers dancing across the panel with practiced ease. The room was silent save for the hum of machinery and her own racing heartbeat. Outside the command center, the spire's systems groaned and flickered, a testament to the chaos unfolding within. Zephyr watched the displays, her knuckles white as she gripped the console. "Come on, Mira, you've got this," she murmured, a silent prayer to whatever cosmic entity might be listening. Suddenly, the spire shuddered, a low rumble echoing through its frame. Lights flickered and the displays shifted, a cascade of information spilling across the screens. "Commander, we're getting feedback from the system," Arlo shouted, his voice a mix of excitement and relief. Mira did it. The control room was bathed in a new light as the systems rebooted, the spire coming back to life with a renewed vigor. Mira let out a shaky breath, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "I'm not dead yet, Arlo. What's next?" she asked, her voice breathless but victorious. "Get out of there before you become a permanent fixture," Arlo replied, his tone light with relief. Mira retraced her steps, moving with renewed purpose. As she crawled back through the vent, a sense of accomplishment buoyed her spirits, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always a spark of hope. Zephyr watched the displays, feeling the tension in the command center ease as systems flickered back online, a tapestry of lights and data. They'd managed to hold the line, and now, with the Spire's systems under their control, they had a fighting chance. "All right, team, let's not rest on our laurels," Zephyr said, her voice a rallying cry. "We've got the upper hand, and I intend to keep it. Let's show these intruders what happens when you underestimate humans." The crew responded with a renewed vigor, their movements sharp and focused. They were a band of misfits, battered and bruised, but unbroken. And in the face of overwhelming odds, they stood tall, ready to fight another day. As Mira rejoined the team, Zephyr met her eyes, a silent exchange of gratitude and respect. They'd survived the worst, and now they would rise anew, a testament to human resilience. "We did it, Commander," Mira said, a smile playing on her lips. "Yes, we did," Zephyr replied, a glint of steely determination in her eyes. "And we're not done yet. Let's finish this." The battle was far from over, but with the Spire at their command and a renewed sense of purpose, they were ready to face whatever came next. And as the command center buzzed with activity, Zephyr knew that they wouldn't go down without a fight. Not today, not ever. The Spire hummed with activity, the tension in the command center easing as lights flickered back to life. Zephyr watched the displays with a mix of relief and irritation. Relief that they'd taken a step forward, irritation at the looming mess still ahead. "All right, team," Zephyr declared, clapping her hands like a bored substitute teacher trying to get a room of disinterested students to pay attention. "We've got our systems back, but we're not out of the woods yet. Those uninvited guests of ours are still making a mess of our hospitality." Marla snorted, her eyes flicking to the monitors. "They're about as welcome as a Rottweiler in a rabbit hutch." But they didn't count on us turning the lights back on. Nothing like a little human ingenuity to ruin an alien's day, Arlo chimed in, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the console. "Seems they forgot to read the fine print on humans shouldn't be underestimated. Guess they thought we'd just roll over and play nice," Zephyr mused, her gaze shifting to the tactical display. "Time to show them just how wrong they are. Got any brilliant ideas, Commander?" "I'm fresh out of Hail Marys," Marla asked, leaning back in her chair with an exaggerated sigh. Zephyr grinned, a hint of mischief sparking in her eyes. "We've got a protocol they don't know about, Project Phoenix. But we're gonna need them to think they've still got the upper hand. We're going to lure them into a trap, playing the long con, are we?" Arlo chuckled. "Classic Zephyr, classic humanity," she corrected. "Marla, I need you to keep them distracted. Flashy and loud, make them think we're faltering. Loud and flashy, huh?" "I knew all those years in drama club would pay off," Marla quipped, already setting up the necessary distractions. "Mira, you're our ace in the hole. Can you rig the Spire's conduits to deliver a little surprise to our guests?" Zephyr asked. "Already on it, Commander. They'll get a shock they won't forget," Mira responded, her fingers flying over the controls. "Good. Let's give them a warm welcome." The command center buzzed with renewed energy, the crew slipping into their roles with a determination born from desperation and a refusal to give up. They'd been pushed to the brink, but now they were ready to push back. Zephyr watched as Marla's theatrical distractions unfolded on the monitors, holographic displays creating illusions of chaos and panic. The aliens were biting, their movements disorganized as they tried to capitalize on what they perceived as human weakness. "Hook, line, and sinker," Marla said, a satisfied grin spreading across her face. "They're buying it good. Let's keep them guessing," Zephyr replied, her mind racing with possibilities. Mira's rigging of the conduits was nearly complete, the spire's power grid set to deliver a surge that would send the invaders reeling. It was a risky move, but desperate times called for electrifying measures. "Just about ready here, Commander," Mira announced, a bead of sweat trickling down her temple. "Let's hope this doesn't blow us all to Kingdom Come. High stakes, higher rewards," Arlo chimed in, ever the optimist. Zephyr took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Prepare to engage on my mark. We'll hit them with everything we've got." The command center fell silent, the only sound the distant hum of the spire's systems as they prepared for the final showdown. Zephyr's heart pounded in her chest, a steady drumbeat driving her forward. "Ready?" Zephyr asked, her voice a quiet command. Ready came the chorus, a symphony of resolve. "On my mark now," Zephyr ordered, her voice sharp as a blade. The spire shuddered, power coursing through its veins as Mira's trap sprung into action. The conduits hummed with energy, a lethal surge racing toward the unsuspecting invaders. The aliens never saw it coming. One moment they were advancing, the next they were floundering, caught in a storm of human ingenuity. Sparks flew, and Zephyr couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction as the aliens scrambled, their ranks in disarray. "Looks like they're getting more than they bargained for," Marla said, her voice filled with dark amusement. "Nothing like a little shock therapy to get them moving," Mira added, her grin a flash of white in the dim light. Zephyr watched the displays, taking note of the chaos as the aliens fell back, their retreat a testament to human resourcefulness. They'd turned the tide, but the battle was far from over. "Time to press our advantage," Zephyr declared, her mind racing with possibilities. "Let's sweep them out for good." The crew sprang into action, their movements a coordinated dance as they executed Zephyr's plan. The aliens were on the back foot, their confidence shattered by the unexpected turn of events. Zephyr led the charge, her presence a guiding force as the humans struck with precision and purpose. The aliens were a formidable foe, but in the face of human tenacity, they faltered. Marla's distractions continued to confuse and confound, the holographic displays weaving a tapestry of misdirection. The aliens were caught in the web, their attempts to regroup thwarted at every turn. "Looks like they are learning the hard way," Marla said, her voice filled with dark humor. "Never underestimate the power of a good distraction, or the power of a well-timed electrical surge," Mira added, her voice tinged with satisfaction. Zephyr couldn't help but smile as she watched her crew in action. They were a ragtag band of misfits, but together they were a force to be reckoned with, and in the face of overwhelming odds they were holding their own. "This is what it means to be human," Zephyr said, her voice a quiet reminder to herself. To stand against the darkness and refuse to be defeated. The battle raged on, the humans fighting with a fierce determination that belied their exhaustion. They'd been pushed to their limits, but they were far from broken. Zephyr watched as the aliens fell back, their retreat a silent admission of defeat. They'd come expecting an easy victory, but the humans had proved them wrong. "Looks like they're heading for the hills," Arlo said, a note of triumph in his voice. "Good riddance," Marla replied, her tone filled with satisfaction. The command center erupted in cheers, the crew's relief palpable as the last of the aliens retreated. They'd faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their resolve a beacon in the void. Zephyr took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing as the weight of the moment settled over her. They'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. "Let's not get complacent," she reminded her crew, her voice a steady anchor in the chaos. "We've won this round, but there's still work to be done." The crew nodded, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. They'd earned a hard-won victory, but they knew the fight wasn't over yet. Time to clean up this mess, Zephyr said, her mind already racing with plans for the next steps, and make sure they don't come back for more. The crew sprang into action, their movements a testament to their resilience. They were battered and bruised but unbroken, and together they would face whatever came next. As the command center hummed with activity, Zephyr couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her crew. They'd faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their tenacity a testament to human spirit. "Let's show them what it means to be human," Zephyr said, her voice a rallying cry. "And why we're not to be underestimated." The crew responded with a renewed vigor, their movements sharp and focused as they set to work. They'd won a battle, but the war was far from over, and as long as they stood together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Zephyr watched as her crew surged into action, each member playing their part in the grand tapestry of survival. They were more than just a team, they were a family, united in purpose and resolve. Together, they would face the darkness and emerge victorious. And in the end, they would stand as a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. Zephyr Halloway stood in the command center, the aftermath of battle swirling around her like the debris of a poorly planned birthday party. The room was alive with the raucous noise of victory, cheers, the crackling of misfiring equipment, and the occasional curse as someone tripped over the glitchy cables. The humans had done it. They'd sent the aliens packing, tails metaphorically between their legs if they had legs, and not something more outlandish like tentacles or anti-gravity orbs. "Looks like we've made quite the impression," Commander Arlo said, his fingers still tapping out a manic rhythm on the console, the tune of a man who'd narrowly avoided death and was itching to celebrate with the universe's worst karaoke. "I'd say we've left them with something to think about next time they consider dropping in unannounced," Zephyr replied, her tone dry as a Martian desert. Marla Quinn slid into view, her grin wide enough to split her face. "Think they'll put humans are a bunch of crazy bastards in their diplomatic notes?" "Hope so," Zephyr answered. "It's about time we got some proper recognition." The holographic displays around them flickered, the last remnants of Marla's chaos fading away like a magician's disappearing act. She patted the console affectionately, a performer giving their final bow. "Best show in the galaxy, and they didn't even have to pay for tickets." Mira sidled up, wiping a smudge of oil from her cheek with the back of her hand. "And we didn't even blow ourselves up." "I'd say that's a win," Zephyr snorted. "High praise, considering our usual track record." The victory felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders, a moment of reprieve in a place where such moments were rarer than a politician who kept their promises. But the reality loomed like the ever-present shadow of the spire. This was just one battle in a war that had no end in sight. A war not just against faceless adversaries from the stars, but against the ever-present threat of complacency, bureaucracy, and the slow grind of the galactic machine that threatened to crush them under its heel. Humanity had shown its teeth, but peace was a fleeting mistress, always slipping just out of reach. "Earth's going to have a field day with this," Arlo mused, leaning back in his chair, cradling a cup of something steaming and probably life-shortening. "They'll be talking about it for years. Let's just hope they remember why we're doing this," Zephyr said, her gaze steady and unflinching. "Not just for survival, but for something more." Marla quirked an eyebrow. "Like not dying horribly at the hands of alien invaders." "Exactly," Zephyr replied with a wry smile. "And maybe a little bit about proving we're not just the universe's favorite punching bag." The command center settled into a semblance of normalcy, though normal was a relative term in the spire. The place still seemed about as stable as a politician's promise, the backup power grid flickering like an indecisive firefly. Mira was at her station, running diagnostics with all the enthusiasm of a cat being forced into a bath. You'd think after all this time, they'd have figured out a more reliable system than hope and pray it doesn't explode. Zephyr chuckled, turning her attention to the viewscreen displaying the Earth below. A fragile blue marble hanging in the void, its beauty marred only by the fact that it was also a target for every cosmic menace with a grudge and a spaceship. "Think they'll finally catch on back home?" Marla asked, her tone half joking, half hopeful. "That maybe we should be ready for the next batch of uninvited guests." "Maybe," Zephyr said, though she doubted it. Humanity's capacity for denial was second only to its stubbornness. "But at least they can't accuse us of not pulling our weight." "True," Arlo said, raising his cup in a mock salute. "Here's to being a pain in the ass to anyone who thinks they can push us around." Zephyr raised an imaginary glass in return. "And here's to hoping they get that message loud and clear." The conversation shifted, the crew relaxing into the easy banter only survivors could manage, their laughter a balm against the darkness that had loomed so close. But even as she joined in, Zephyr's mind was already spinning with plans and contingencies. They'd won this skirmish, but complacency was the real enemy, and it never slept. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of activity, the crew working to patch up the Spire's systems, fix what they could and jury-rig what they couldn't. It was like slapping a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, but it was all they had, and it would have to do. Zephyr watched them work, her heart swelling with a fierce pride. These were her people, her family, fighting tooth and nail against a universe that seemed to have it in for them. They'd face down the darkness and come out the other side battered but unbowed. And as long as they stood together, there was nothing they couldn't face. When the work was done, and the command center was as stable as it was going to get, Zephyr called the crew together for a debrief. They gathered around her, the fatigue etched into their features tempered by the glow of victory. "All right, folks," Zephyr began, her voice carrying the weight of command and the warmth of camaraderie. "We did good today." "Damn good," Marla snorted. "Damn good. We were bloody brilliant," Zephyr chuckled. "If I were anyone else, I'd say we were lucky. But you're not anyone else," Mira chimed in, a tired grin on her face. "No," Zephyr agreed, "I'm not. And that's why I know it wasn't just luck." They shared a moment of silence, the gravity of their situation settling over them like a heavy cloak. They'd won this round, but it was just a small part of a much larger war, one that wouldn't be won with a single skirmish or a momentary victory. "We've got to be ready," Zephyr said, her tone turning serious. "Today was a wake-up call not just for us but for everyone back home. We've shown we're not to be underestimated, but we've also got to make sure we're not underprepared." Arlo nodded. "Think they'll listen? They better," Zephyr replied with a sharp edge to her voice. "Because next time it might not be us standing here." The crew nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. They'd done their part, but it was up to those on Earth to heed the warning and prepare for what lay ahead. "Let's make sure they get the message," Marla said, her voice fierce with determination. Zephyr smiled, a fierce glint in her eyes. "Let's make sure they can't ignore it." The debrief concluded, the crew dispersing to tend to their duties, the banter resuming as they slipped back into their routines. But even as they laughed and joked, there was an undercurrent of determination that ran deep through each of them. Zephyr stood at the console, watching the Earth turn slowly in the viewscreen. A fragile world in a hostile universe, but one that was defended by those who refused to be beaten. They'd shown their mettle today, and they'd continue to do so for as long as it took. "Earth's not alone in this," Mira said, coming to stand beside her. "We're not the only ones who have a stake in all this." Zephyr nodded, her gaze fixed on the blue planet below. "But we've got to make sure they know that. And we've got to be ready for whatever comes next." Mira glanced at her. "Think we're up to it?" Zephyr chuckled, a low, dark sound. "If today's anything to go by, I'd say we're just getting started." Mira smiled, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Then let's make sure they don't forget it." With that, Zephyr turned back to the console, her mind already turning to the future. They'd won this battle, but the war raged on, and there was no telling what the next challenge would bring. But if there was one thing she knew for certain, it was that humanity was ready. They'd face the darkness and come out the other side stronger, more united than ever before. And as long as they stood together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The command center buzzed with activity, The crew, a well-oiled machine that refused to be beaten. They'd shown the universe what it meant to be human, and they'd continue to do so for as long as it took. Zephyr took a deep breath, the weight of command settling comfortably on her shoulders. This was just the beginning, but it was a beginning forged in fire and determination. And whatever the universe had in store, they'd be ready to face it, together, as one. With a final glance at the Earth below, Zephyr turned away from the viewscreen, her mind already racing with plans and contingencies. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They'd shown they were not to be underestimated. And that was a message that would echo across the stars, loud and clear.